Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Explainer. Today we are jumping straight into a massive consumer headline that literally just broke this morning. A brand new U.S. housing law has officially taken effect. And honestly, the political roller coaster it took to get here, it's absolutely fascinating.
Okay, let's dive into this. If you check your consumer headlines today, you're seeing a lot of talk about a new law aimed at making housing more affordable. And look, this isn't just high-level political jargon. This is a legislative move designed to directly impact your wallet and, well, the very makeup of your own neighborhood. You know, whenever financial news leads with housing, it's because housing represents the single largest expense for the vast majority of us. So a shift in housing law? That's a shift in the broader economy, for sure.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the affordability crisis, take a look inside the bipartisan bill, explore the presidential protest, unpack the automatic law loophole, and finally wrap up with what this all means for you. Starting off with Section 1, the housing affordability crisis. To really understand the solution that just took effect, we first need to appreciate the sheer scale of the problem.
We are right in the middle of a nationwide housing affordability crisis. And it's important to note, this isn't just a localized issue popping up in a few major coastal cities. It's a pressing, coast-to-coast challenge. Over the last few years, we've basically seen a perfect storm of economic factors collide, locking millions of Americans out of homeownership. High interest rates have dramatically bumped up the cost of borrowing money, making monthly mortgage payments way more expensive. And at the exact same time, we're dealing with historically low inventory. I mean, homeowners who snagged low mortgage rates years ago, they're understandably super reluctant to sell, which creates this massive bottleneck in the market. With fewer homes available, the competition for the ones that actually do hit the market is incredibly fierce, driving prices up even higher. This brand new law was deliberately designed as a direct response to this massive structural hurdle.
Moving on to Section 2, inside the bipartisan housing bill. Let's analyze exactly what this specific legislative measure actually intends to do.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how the bill tackles the crisis through two distinct, targeted strategies. First, it aims to increase the supply of homes. It's the fundamental rule of economics, right? Supply and demand. Because more inventory generally cools down overheated markets, the legislation removes certain red tape to incentivize the construction of new housing units. Second, and this is absolutely crucial, it actively limits large institutional investors from buying up single-family houses. Over the last few years, massive corporate portfolios have been absorbing everyday homes, often sweeping into suburban neighborhoods with these all-cash offers. Regular families relying on traditional mortgages, they simply cannot compete with that. When thousands of starter homes get converted into permanent corporate rentals, it artificially chokes off the supply of homes available for people looking to buy their first house. So, the goal here is to push back against that trend and keep single-family homes available for everyday consumers.
And this measure didn't just scrape by. It successfully passed through the legislature with strong bipartisan support. In today's heavily divided political climate, seeing that level of broad, shared agreement across the aisle really highlights just how universally urgent the housing market crisis has become. Lawmakers representing wildly different districts and economic philosophies actually found common ground on the fact that corporate consolidation of single-family homes is stifling the American dream of homeownership.
All right, Section 3, the presidential protest. Because just when a bill successfully passes the legislature, things can get incredibly complicated at the executive level.
And this brilliantly illustrates the complication. Despite the widespread backing from lawmakers, the bill hit an immediate roadblock when it reached the Oval Office. President Trump made the calculated executive decision to withhold his signature from the bipartisan measure. Normally, in our system of government, a bill arriving at the president's desk faces a binary outcome, right? A signature to enact it or a veto to reject it. But here, the legislation was met with silence, intentionally pausing its momentum.
The reasoning behind this was actually entirely separate from the housing market itself. The president withheld his signature specifically to protest the Senate's failure to pass an unrelated piece of legislation known as the Save America Act. This is actually a pretty common strategic political maneuver in Washington, tying the fate of one legislative priority to the success of another. It's a form of high-stakes leverage. By threatening to hold up a highly popular bipartisan housing bill, the executive branch was attempting to force the legislature's hand on a completely different political agenda item.
Which brings us to Section 4, the automatic law loophole. This is where our narrative complication gets resolved through a fascinating constitutional quirk.
In this scenario, President Trump opted for a crucial middle ground. Yes, he refused to sign the bill, but critically, he also chose not to formally veto it. You see, a formal veto would have sent the bill straight back to Congress, where lawmakers could have attempted to override his veto with a 2/3 majority vote.
Instead, he essentially just let the legislation sit on his desk, placing it in a very specific constitutional gray area. So the crucial point is that this triggers a mechanism known as automatic enactment. Under Article 1, Section 7 of the U.S. Constitution, the president has a strict time limit to act on legislation. If the president doesn't explicitly veto a bill and return it to Congress within 10 days, excluding Sundays, by the way, while Congress is still in session, it automatically becomes law. The framers of the Constitution specifically designed this 10-day rule to prevent a president from quietly killing legislation simply by ignoring it. They wanted to force the executive branch to go on the record with a formal veto if they opposed a bill. Because that 10-day clock ran out and Congress was still in session, the lack of a veto means the bill naturally takes effect, completely bypassing the need for a physical presidential signature. It's a brilliant, built-in fail-safe of our civic mechanics that ensures the legislative process keeps moving.
Finally, Section 5. What this means for you. Let's bring this high-level political process all the way back down to the consumer level. Let's move to and see how this builds, walking right through the chronological timeline. First, a pressing, nationwide affordability crisis forces lawmakers' hands. Then, a targeted, bipartisan bill passes, aiming to boost supply and limit corporate investors from buying up neighborhood properties. And finally, despite a presidential protest, the unsigned bill bypasses the Oval Office through automatic enactment and becomes law today. The constitutional clock ran out, and the policy has shifted from theoretical legislation into active, enforceable law.
So what does this all mean? Well, it leaves us with one final provocative question. How will limiting large corporate investors actually change the housing landscape in your local neighborhood? As this law takes effect this morning, keep an eye on your own streets. Without Wall Street cash competing for starter homes, are we going to see more single-family homes become available for everyday buyers? Will the playing field finally start to level out for young families trying to enter the market? We've unpacked the politics, the policy, and the constitutional process. Now, the real-world effects are about to unfold right in front of us. Keep observing your local market, and I'll see you in the next explainer.